Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday morning, December 19th. I waited until mid-morning. I wanted to see some of the early morning model runs, specifically the 12Z NAM model, which we will talk about over the next few minutes here. There certainly is some snowfall from the northern plains into the upper Midwest Great Lakes associated with a clipper type system over the next 12 to 24 hours or so, and then some mid-Atlantic snow is likely from later tomorrow night into the early morning hours on Saturday. We'll talk about that over the next few minutes, and that will be followed by some of the coldest air of the year so far into the mid-Atlantic, into the northeast U.S. for Saturday night, Sunday night into the day on Monday. First off, we take a look ahead here, kind of quickly move through the next several days into the early part of January. Just a couple things I'm looking at here. Overall, the trend is for milder conditions across much of the nation next week. It certainly doesn't warm up significantly by Christmas Eve or Christmas Day in the northeastern part of the nation. It does moderate some, certainly, compared to the upcoming weekend. But later on next week, much of the nation will return to above normal conditions. However, there are signs just beyond that to the early part of January for a colder pattern to return, and we'll talk about a couple of these signals for that colder pattern to return early January here in the opening of this video discussion. First of all, I wanted to take a look at last night's 0Z run of the ensemble version of the European model. We're looking at 500 millibar height anomalies across North America, and just kind of wanted to go through these rather quickly and point out what changes develop as we get into the end of December and especially into the early part of January. Notice, first of all, as we begin here on Thursday, December 19th, a lot of blue showing up across the Hudson Bay region of Canada all the way into Greenland, upper level trough. That is not indicative, certainly, of a blocking pattern that we often look for this time of the year. But watch what happens as we move forward through next week into the first week of January. We have, by the latter part of the weekend, trough along the eastern seaboard and a ridge, pretty impressive ridge out across the middle of the nation all the way up into the central part of Canada. And then we get towards Christmas, middle of next week, you start to see some blocking type upper level ridging show up here over the northern part of Canada. This is again by about the middle of next week. We're talking Christmas Day right here. Very strong upper level ridging over the Hudson Bay region of Canada. Now, as we go through the latter part of next week, that actually intensifies and starts to retrograde or back to the west here by the time we get to Saturday, December 28th. This is some very impressive blocking that's setting up to the north across the northeastern part of Canada. We go out a little farther in time here. Now we're all the way out, past 10 days out now. This is the beginning of the following week here, Monday, December 30th. And a lot of blocking starting to show up here as we end December, move into the early part of January, all across Canada. Look at this. By the time we get to the beginning of the new month, this is now 2 weeks from yesterday, Wednesday, January 1st. A lot of blocking here. This is very impressive for an ensemble run to show this kind of intense high-pressure ridging 2 weeks out. This, again, is a little bit more than 2 weeks out. Ensemble runs tend to kind of smooth things out with time, so the highest highs and the lowest lows tend to become more and more neutralized as time goes on in an ensemble run. So this is quite impressive, the fact that this is still well above normal all the way out 2 weeks into the early part of January. And then it gets a little bit more interesting with this trough starting to extend back to the west, and this is about as far out as this model run goes, 15 days out into the early part of January, specifically January 3rd here, with a lot of impressive blocking to the north all across Canada and Greenland, and this trough kind of retrograding like the upper level ridge did across Canada into the eastern states. So even though there certainly are signs for a big size warm up next week across much of the nation. As we go into the following week, it's specifically into the early part of January, the overall pattern tends to look colder and perhaps stormier again for the central and eastern states. Well, one last plot I'd like to show regarding that change coming at the end of December into early January before we get on to the near-term forecast. This is the Arctic Oscillation Teleconnection Index, and its closely related cousin known as the North Atlantic Oscillation Index. Both tend to have a downtrend as we go through the latter part of December into the early part of January. This is anything you see in red here is the forecast for the Arctic Oscillation Index going through the rest of December into 1st of January right here. Notice it moves from around neutral territory over the next several days back into negative territory by the time we get to the end of December into the early part of January. This time of the year when the AO and NAO drop into negative territory and are sustained in negative territory, that generally is correlated with high latitude blocking up across central and northeastern Canada, for example, with higher heights and higher pressures in that part of North America. And high latitude blocking is a more favorable pattern for cold air outbreaks to make their way from northern Canada into the central and eastern U.S. So we had kind of a couple signals here. The upper level changes happening with regard to the forecast from the ensemble run of the European and this particular teleconnection index all point to the development of some high latitude blocking as we end December, move into that first week of January. Well, let's now focus in on the near term, and we'll use the 12Z NAM model run. Just came out a little while ago here. This is not the model we typically look at. We look at the GFS model here, but for now we'll take a look at the NAM. This is a forecast of total snowfall over the next 3 days. Usually I show 5 or 10 day snowfall maps, but this is over the next 3 days between now and Sunday morning. First of all, you can see this track right here. That's all associated with that clipper system that really started right around Alberta, often referred to as an Alberta clipper system, moving along in this fashion here and weakening as it approaches the Ohio Valley later on tomorrow into tomorrow night. But it still plays an important role. But you can see up to a few inches, maybe 4 or 5 inches in some spots. This may be underdoing it a little bit across this part of the upper Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Could be even higher amounts than what is shown on this particular model run. But the main story here is it's laying down a swath of snow here over the next few days here. This is in the immediate term over the next 1 or 2 days from the northern plains across the upper Midwest, and then ultimately that system tends to weaken and fade away here as it reaches the Ohio Valley. But mid-Atlantic snow, northeastern snow, especially the interior section, is likely from later tomorrow night into the early morning hours on Saturday between that weakening clipper system and what we'll see in a moment here, an intensifying ocean low. That low will come close enough to the coast to help to produce some snowfall across the mid-Atlantic, especially the northern mid-Atlantic region and interior sections of the northeastern U.S. Again, later tomorrow night into the day on Saturday. Well, let's look at the continental U.S., the 12Z NAM 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps, beginning here with mid-morning on Thursday, the 19th, and we'll move forward here. A lot of ridging across the nation as we begin the day here. But this is the area of interest here as far as the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast U.S. is concerned. A developing trough that drops to the south and east by tonight and now into the day on Friday, early morning hours. It's kind of intensifying here, slowly moving to the south and east, so that by the time we get to midday on Friday, you have a pretty decent looking upper level trough system sitting over the Ohio Valley and sliding slowly to the east. And again, remember there was a surface clipper system moving in this same general direction but weakening at the same time. An an ocean low is starting to form over the western Atlantic. Here we go now by tomorrow night into the early morning hours on Saturday. And again, we've talked about this kind of an inverted trough that extends from the center of the low off the coast back inland towards the mid-Atlantic region right here. You can see kind of an extension right here. It's what we call an inverted trough, and that plays a big role. Even though the center of the ocean low may be out here, you have this trough extending back to the west. And exactly where that trough sets up is a difficult forecast and likely to be a little bit more concentrated snow area. And right now it looks like it's basically focused in on the northern mid-Atlantic region, but we'll go out a little farther in time. Again, quite impressive inverted trough, as we call it, back towards the mid-Atlantic region. This is early morning hours on Saturday. Finally starts to pull away, and it is at this time that the floodgates are open and the coldest air of the season so far rides into the mid-Atlantic region on stiff northwest winds Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday morning in the deep freeze. Probably the lowest temperature so far this season will be reached early Monday morning. Places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. Don't be surprised to see the lower teens in some of those suburbs to the north and west of D.C. by early Monday morning. Maybe near 10 degrees to the north and west of Philly by early Monday morning. Stays quite cold for the rest of Monday and really stays pretty cold with a little bit of moderation into Tuesday, which happens to be Christmas Eve. And there may be some precipitation to deal with on Christmas Eve, even Christmas Day, in the northeastern part of the nation. Well, we'll go through the 850 millibar temperature anomalies, again using the 12Z NAM model run here. Starting off quite chilly today across the Great Lakes, northeast U.S. There was a cold frontal passage in the overnight hours. The southern half of the nation, western part of the nation, above normal. Then we can see some colder than normal air really starting to show itself by the time we get to early Friday morning. And this is when that ocean low starts to intensify off the mid-Atlantic, off the Carolina coastline. And this cold shot starts to show up here on the maps by the time we get to tomorrow night, especially into the day on Saturday. This is midday on Saturday. Penn State has a college football playoff game at noon on Saturday. It will be very cold. Temperatures probably in the low to mid 20s at best, and there will be a stiff northwest wind, meaning much lower wind chill values. Bring your blankets if you're going to that game, maybe a snow shower or two. Then the real cold relative to normal comes in Saturday night into the day on Sunday. Sunday right here, no doubt the coldest day of the year, of the season so far. Places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, most areas will not escape the 20s on Sunday afternoon. Still a little bit brisk as well, so a little bit lower wind chill values, and that cold tends to hang on into Monday morning. And again, the coldest temperatures in this particular cold snap could actually take place late Sunday night, early Monday morning in that I-95 corridor region, with some of the suburbs going down to the lower teens, maybe even some areas going down to the 10-degree mark. Above normal conditions throughout much of the western half of the nation for the latter part of the upcoming weekend into the early part of next week. Now I want to look at the surface maps and kind of focus in on the mid-Atlantic and the northeast U.S. Relatively dry conditions today. We'll move through the 12Z NAM model run on an hourly basis and then start to experience and show the precipitation moving in the overnight hours, and then especially early tomorrow morning. This is now the forecast map for tomorrow morning. Remember, we have that Clipper system that's moving into the Ohio Valley, tending to weaken. At the same time, an ocean low is starting to intensify off the coast. Now, whatever falls in the morning hours, let's say on Friday, across D.C., likely in the form of rain, a rain, snow shower mix farther to the north in the southeastern part of Pennsylvania, for example. But you get up to east central Pennsylvania, you're talking about snow by midday on Friday, and it tends to evolve into more of a snowy pattern north of the Mason-Dixon line by later tomorrow into tomorrow night. Now, this is the 7 p.m. forecast map for tomorrow night, Friday night. Here is that ocean low, and there again is kind of a trough extending back what we call an inverted trough from the center of the surface low back, in this case, to the mid-Atlantic region here. And that is helping to produce some snowfall up across Pennsylvania, for example. That will tend to drive to the south and west into northeastern Maryland. Even the suburbs of D.C. can see some snow out of this later on tomorrow night into the early morning hours on Saturday. And here we go by early Saturday, and then finally by 7 a.m. on Saturday morning. Still some snow over the Delmarva Peninsula, and by this time it's all snow, no rain, all the way into southeastern PA and all the way to the D.C. suburbs. I'm expecting maybe a coating, maybe up to an inch in some parts of the D.C. suburban areas, especially to the north and east, or maybe an inch of snow, maybe a coating to as much as 2 or 3 inches across southeastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, northern part of the Delmarva Peninsula, again, a coating to as much as 2 or 3 inches. And then you notice this isobar pattern here. The colder air starts to flood into the mid-Atlantic region on the backside of this system here later Saturday into the day on Sunday. This is the midday Saturday forecast map. Again, very cold for the game at Penn State at noon on Saturday. And it just gets colder and colder Saturday night into the day on Sunday. This is the Sunday morning forecast map, and this is the coldest air mass of the season, probably the coldest day of the season so far. Temperatures likely to hold in the 20s, even in the big cities along the I-95 corridor, D.C. to Philadelphia to New York City. So kind of a wintry look here, all the way from the northern plains to the Great Lakes and Midwest, and the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and northeastern U.S. over the next few days. And again, looks like some snow in the Mid-Atlantic region later tomorrow night into the morning hours on Saturday. All that to be followed by the coldest air mass of the season so far for later this week and into the early part of next week. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.